when she was in that department.
So I rise to speak in support of my amendment number 51, standing in my name on the paper. And before I get to the substance of what I want to say how proud I am that the Conservative government passed the Environment Act that resulted in cleaner water, purer air, less waste and lower energy. Only the Conservatives could do that, and I know my noble friend, the Baroness Coffey, had a hand in that. Now, at an earlier stage of this bill, I did probe the Minister on the environment protections for tidal energy. But upon reflection, the amendment was too tightly drawn around tidal and insufficiently drawn for the protections of other type, wave and barrage energy. And further, I do not think that sufficient attention was paid in my earlier remarks to coastal and estuarine environments, which are all part of the offshore scene. So I've altered my approach to ensure that all marine proposals must consider the environmental impacts of their introduction. Now, of course, I do welcome the government's late acceptance of some of these principles in their belatedly tabled Amendment 38, and on this side we are grateful for it. But as my noble friends have said, they do not go quite far enough. The amendments require the Secretary of State, my amendments, to assess the impact on the environment and animal welfare standards and on the installation of generation tidal, barrage, wave energy, together with its associated cabling. Now, Amendment 38 talks in general about the sustainability in its widest sense. But my amendment seeks to define what sustainability means. It isn't just carbon. It's about the wider impacts on the flora and fauna. And I noted and listened carefully to what the noble Lord Hunt said about the framework documents that are come forward. But they're in the future, and we're in the now. And it's the certainty that we crave. Now, I will not detain your lordships because it is late with my tale of my visit in November to the St Malo tidal barrage, the world's first, opened nearly 60 years ago. But I do want to dwell for a moment to consider the environmental costs of that valuable piece of infrastructure in France. There are lessons from history to be learned as we look forward to a post-carbon world. Because, my lords, is that whilst saving the environment by reducing carbon emissions on one hand, the French have damaged it on the other. My amendment seeks to direct Great British Energy to strike the appropriate balance between the desirability of reducing emissions and the essentiality of protecting flora and fauna in these places. In commenting on the St Malo barrage, Thomas Adcock, the Associate Professor in the Department of Engineering Science at Oxford University, said there's been a major environmental impact on the Rance estuary as a result of that tidal barrage, saying this would make it very difficult to get permission to do such a barrage again. Researchers point to the adverse impacts on marine life by altering sedimentation patterns, as well as oxygen and nutrient levels in the water. Sand eels and plaice have disappeared, while silting has reduced the number and variation of other fauna. It is in the public interest that these are considered so that mitigations can be put in place. So my amendment seeks to ensure that when the government's tilted sustainability balance is engaged, it must give sufficient weight to the flora and fauna under the environmental pillar, not just pull up that decarbonisation trump card out of the top pocket. And this is why my amendment is needed and goes beyond Amendment 38. And, my lords, I am not starry-eyed about the practicality of building big machines that can survive in the most hostile environments, pounded by seas and eaten by saltwater corrosion. I'm involved in the liquid fertiliser business. So I know more than most how hard it is to engineer these things in tough, salt-aggressive places. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It's hard to engineer reliability in some of these unforgiving places, so the installations can be larger and more intrusive, environmentally intrusive, and require more maintenance than needed on land. And that's why this amendment is serious. It will require GB Energy to take into account a number of factors and to continuously monitor when assessing offshore energy proposals. For example, the cumulative impact of installations when considered along nearby projects, the transboundary impacts when activities in other countries may be impacted, like commercial fishing, for example, any interrelationships where one receptor like noise can have a knock-on impact on others to disturb species. And in particular, subsea noise impacts on marine mammals, physical processes, which include changes to the sedimentary flow, and navigational risk assessments, because sometimes vessels can be deflected into the path of others. So taken together, these amendments would ensure some of the most delicate marine and coastal habitats, like the ones introduced by my noble friend Baroness Coffey, like the 321 square kilometre Cromer Shoal Chalk Beds Marine Conservation Zone, one of 91 such zones established by the last government, would be protected. Look, I'm not against harnessing this most inexhaustible supply of offshore energy, including tidal. This energy is there, it's year-round, it's predictable, it's reliable, it deserves to be won and should be won. But it's just remarkable that the Secretary of State isn't required to give the appropriate directions to GB Energy to balance not just the carbon environmental benefits, but those wider environmental safeguards in its widest sense. Now, this evening we have sat on the water bill. The water bill is the consequence of not thinking ahead about what might happen when a public utility gets carried away. So let's put the protections in now to constrain Great British Energy on the face of the bill, to require the Secretary of State to ensure that a private body established for public purpose acts in the wider public interest, not its private self-interest, and sets an example to others. So in summary, I do agree with the sentiment of 38, but it doesn't go far enough. We must not allow carbon alone to trump all the other environmental considerations. I'm going to listen carefully to the debate, but, my Lords, I do feel that because of the inadequacy of Government 38, if adjustments aren't made, I may test and divide the House accordingly.